What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Rams Brothers. I'm your host, Dean, and I'm joined, as always, by my brother and the other great host of this show, Nick. This weekend, we have a couple of really interesting matchups that are going to determine the playoff seedings in the NFC. The Rams are going to go on to host a wildcard game in a couple of weeks. They're going to rest some starters this week. But before we jump into this episode, first and most importantly, how are you, my good brother?
I'm great, man. I mean, it's the second year in a row the Rams essentially have a bye going into the playoffs. We get to watch meaningless Jimmy G football. I was worried that we'd have to watch him in a regular season game that mattered, but we didn't have to all season because Stafford started every game, and now we get to watch him do a victory lap against Seattle. So that's exciting.
Yeah, it's going to be a good one. At least you'll be able to get to see guys like Blake Corum. You'll see Jimmy G. You'll probably see some backup offensive linemen and everything that's come out in relation to Jimmy G and the way that he's handled everything professionally from Coach McVay has been really, really impressive. And you know what? Guess who got the game ball against the second win against the Niners this year? It was Jimmy G for his work on the scout team. He got one of the game balls. So, I mean, he's, you bring in Jimmy G, you beat the Niners 2 times this season. So, yeah, it's good to kind of kick back, enjoy the weekend, and see how all these potential playoff scenarios unfold. Because you got the Vikings and the Lions, which is going to be fascinating just to determine the 1 seed in the NFC. And then the Rams are going to, if they rest starters and they do end up losing this game against Seattle, there's a couple of things that could determine who their potential matchup could be in the first wild card game of the playoffs. So you're looking at potentially the Packers, the Commanders, if you keep the 3 seed, or you're looking at potentially the Vikings or the Lions if you fall into the 4 seed. So just to watch all this weekend, but to also kick back and realize how difficult of a journey it was to start 1-4 and then be able to rest starters and host a wild card game at home, the second straight season, I think is just really impressive. So hats off to the front office, the coaching staff, and everybody that has been instrumental in getting this team back up to speed.
Definitely remarkable. I put out a tweet earlier this week after they confirmed that they're going to rest starters. That was like, I hate this decision. I think it's a really dumb call. There's a chance where we either play, like if we rest starters and try not to win, or just rest starters and lose, then we are locked into playing that Detroit-Minnesota loser of that game. And I don't want to see either of those teams in the first round. So I'm like, I think that's a really bad idea. I'd rather play Washington or the Packers because I just think those 2 teams are not as good as Minnesota or Detroit. I mean, it's a 14-win 5 seed either way. That's just scary to me. And then a lot of people respond and be like, oh, we want Detroit, all this stuff, typical like rah-rah fans, and there's nothing wrong with that. But then Cooper Kupp retweeted me because I posted a video of us drinking his coffee, and I was like, uh-oh, Cooper Kupp may see that I am not excited for them to play some of these teams. So I deleted the tweet. But on this pod, I will stand here and say that I would like them to try to win this game with the starters, but I know they're not going to do that. But I think playing the Commanders in that first round would be a huge difference to get momentum, to start the playoffs hot, win one at home, and then go off and beat whoever you have to beat. But getting past that first round, I think is huge.
They would be favorites in that game. I think they would be favorites if they hosted the Commanders. If they were to host the Packers, the Lions, or the Vikings, they're most likely going to be underdogs in the wild card round. So this is what you're looking at for the Seahawks game. They're plus 6.5. They were originally plus 2.5, and then the Rams announced that they weren't going to be playing any of their starters, or a majority of them rather. And still, 56% of the bets have been placed on the Rams, but they're 6.5-point underdogs. If you want them on the money line, you're still confident Jimmy G is going to be able to get the job done. You get them at plus 210. And here's what we're looking at in terms of current seedings. So like we mentioned, we would be hosting Washington. Washington's 11-5. It's a rookie quarterback. It's a coach that's been through the process, that has coached in a Super Bowl in the past. They have a decent rushing attack, but their defense is suspect. But I really genuinely think, like when you look across the board, which one of these teams doesn't really have any type of issue on either side of the ball? Like you look at Minnesota, their defense is a little bit suspect. Their special teams isn't fantastic. You have a quarterback in Sam Darnold who's you can make a mistake at any moment. Detroit has all these injuries defensively. Green Bay is 11-5. Obviously, the run game is a strength, but they just don't seem like they're consistent from week to week. And they did scratch and claw back to get back in that game against Minnesota this past week. But, they make mistakes too. And I think Jordan Love, like going into, 5 minutes into the fourth quarter, had like 64 passing yards. So there's vulnerabilities on all of these potential matchups. But I do think, to your original point, if you do get Washington in this game, I think Rams fans would be a little bit more settled, and you would be hosting a team where you would be a favorite going into the wild card round, which is, in a season where you started 1-4, you're probably going to end the season 10-7. I think that would be highly favorable for a team that needs to get things going.
Yeah, you're going up against a rookie quarterback, his first year in the league, going up against a seasoned vet in Matthew Stafford, who already has a Super Bowl under his belt. And I think that experience is like, that would be the most important thing for me in that matchup is he's Jaden Daniels, as great as he has been all season. He's going to make mistakes in the playoffs. He just hasn't been there before. But if you're going up against Detroit with, a team that went to the NFC Championship last year, you have a quarterback in Jared Goff that went to a Super Bowl. Like, they know the stakes of these playoffs. They are they're made right now to win the Super Bowl. They remind me of us from 2021. That's not the team I want to face. If we get to them later, so be it. As the teams start to break off and then we start gaining momentum, totally fine with that. I don't want to play essentially the Chiefs of the NFC in the first round.
Yeah, that's fair. I will say that some of the differences with the Lions right now, like when you look at them defensively, they're scary. They're not scary because of all the injuries. Obviously, Aiden Hutchinson and just injuries to their back end and to their linebacking core. But I want to read this from Brett Coleman because I thought this was really interesting. And you can't necessarily draw comparisons to the 2021 Rams when you have the fourth or fifth worst pass protection unit up front and you're missing so many pieces defensively. There's no Von Miller. There's no Aaron Donald on the Lions. And this is from Brett. He said the three worst offensive lines in the NFL in terms of pressure rate allowed are the Seahawks, Patriots, Titans. You probably all expected them to be there. But do you know that the fourth and fifth worst are Minnesota and Detroit, which I thought was –
And then the sixth worst – the sixth worst is us if we play Joe Noteboom.
Yeah, that's fair. That's a very good point. So if Rob Havenstein can't go in the first round of the playoffs, that's where a lot of your concerns go. But it's crazy that the Lions, there's so many first round picks up front, and they're still not one of the best pass protecting units. So they have some holes, and it's not due to the way that their roster is constructed, the way Brad Holmes built it, to Jared Goff. It's due to injuries and just some flaws that team has. And, I think it's going to be really interesting. But here's what we're looking at in terms of what you guys should be watching this weekend. So we mentioned Lions, Vikings to clinch the number 1 seed. The winner of that game clinches that number 1 seed. For the Rams to clinch the 3rd seed, they have to beat the Seahawks, or the Bucs have to lose to the Saints or tie to the Saints. The Bucs have to clinch. In order for them to clinch the NFC South, they would win versus the Saints, or the Falcons would lose/tie to the Panthers. And for the Buccaneers to clinch the 3 seed, they would need to beat the Saints, and the Rams would have to lose to the Seahawks. And then also you're looking at a potential matchup if you get the 6 or 7 seed. Commanders to clinch the number 6 seed, they need a win over the Cowboys, and the Cowboys don't even know who the hell they're starting at quarterback, whether it's going to be Cooper Rush, might be Trey Lance, Mike McCarthy, who the hell knows what's going on with him as a head coach. Or the Packers would have to lose versus the Bears, or would have to tie versus the Cowboys and Packers. So, or it would be Cowboys and Packers would be a tie versus the Bears. So there's all these implications with the Commanders potentially clinching the 6th seed. All they essentially have to do is win the game, and they own outright the 6th seed because they have the tiebreaker over the Packers. The Packers to clinch the 6th seed, they need a win versus the Bears plus a Commanders loss/tie versus the Cowboys, or they need a tie versus the Bears and Commanders, or a tie versus the Bears plus Commanders loss versus the Cowboys. So it gets a little bit like, I feel like Charlie Day, that meme where he was like, oh my God.
It gets a little hairy. Really, the Commanders have to win if they want to control that seed.
Yeah.
Who's to say they want to control it? You know what I mean? I don't know if they're looking at it right now. I guess the way everything unfolds. We play the later games, so they don't know who's going to, like, if we're going to win or not. So they can't really decide if they want to play us or somebody else. Same with the Packers. So, I mean, it's going to be a roll of the dice, but I mean, I think the Commanders are going to have no problem beating the Cowboys. Same with the Packers and the Bears. So so I'm just assuming both those teams win. And then the Commanders are locked into the seed, or the 6th seed above the Packers. So to me, that just wants me, like, in my brain, if I'm Sean McVay or in the Rams organization, I'm saying I'm going to play this Seattle game so I can have a young team coming in to our house, as opposed to losing that game and then playing the Minnesota-Detroit loser. And if it's Minnesota, I don't feel as scared than I do if Detroit loses that game and then it's us, Goff coming back to SoFi. I don't like that at all. I think that's
you know what? I'm just going to argue. I
two
just want to argue
playoffs in a row. First
Yeah.
round, we have to play Detroit. I hate that.
I know. And I just want to argue the other side too, because I'm kind of understanding where Rams fans are coming from. You get a potential revenge situation where Matthew Stafford can bury the Detroit Lions early on and open up a gaping hole for the other NFC teams in the playoffs. And then, your ride, the only really difficult journey potentially that you would have to take in the remainder of the playoffs would potentially be to Philadelphia.
Yeah.
So that would be something that maybe he's trying to figure out is, maybe you get this kind of situation. And, maybe they feel like they played really well against Minnesota, the Lions potentially, they played well against the Lions too. They took them all the way to overtime in week 1. I know teams are completely different at this point in the season, but I'm just trying to understand the other side in terms of, we don't really care who we play. We're hosting a playoff game. It's a luxury situation. So whoever's going to come to our house is going to get a difficult matchup. And I just want to share this out too, because I thought this was really interesting. We know Jared Verse is going to the Pro Bowl, so congratulations to Jared Verse. But I got a text from my good buddy Bruce, an avid listener of the podcast. Shout out, Bruce. We love you. He said, it's crazy to think that these last 2 rookie classes have already experienced 2 playoff berths and a division title already and a Niners winning streak. And there's only one thing left for them to do right now. So I'm wondering if Sean McVay is not necessarily looking ahead, but just trying to understand, like, if we're going to host a playoff game, we match up well against any of these 4 teams, even the Packers. They had a chance to win that game in week 4. So I think it's going to be
fully healthy in that Packers game either. I don't think we had Puka or Cup, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. I don't think we had either.
It was early. It was like week 4.
It was week 4. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And the Rams dropped to 1-3. And then the next week, I think they played the Bears, and then they dropped to 1-4.
Or maybe it was week 5 and they were 1-3, and that was their 4th loss in a row.
Yeah, something like that.
And then they played Minnesota on Thursday, and then they won that game.
Right. Of course, I feel like the Commanders are the easier matchup, but I can't say that I feel overwhelmingly negative if you do get caught up with Minnesota or Detroit. So we'll say, I think the Packers actually scare me the most amongst the 3 teams.
I think if you're the Eagles, you're sitting there like, oh my God, I can't believe there's a scenario where we have to play the Packers. It's like we played them week 1 in Brazil and we barely escaped by. It's like we got this 2nd seed and it sucks. I mean, that's what I would love to see. So then Green Bay knocks out
Philly.
The Eagles. Yeah. So then it's like, I mean, to me, then it would be like completely open for like, even if you have to play Detroit, then Philly is the scariest team to me, in my opinion. If you want me to be completely honest, I think Philly, but there's no scenario we play them in the first round. I just think you have to get past the first round. I don't care how it looks. If you win that game, then you're the team nobody wants to see, because then you're the one you're the only Super Bowl winning head coach and quarterback combo in the entire bunch. So that, you add that to your back, and you got Stafford, and this whole thing wasn't about winning 1 Super Bowl, bringing him here. It was about winning multiple. So, I just don't want to lose round 1 of the playoffs, and we're in the exact same position we were last year, even though we won the division this year. It's like, I think
the other thing to think about too is I agree with you entirely, because then you're 10-7 2 years in a row. You lose in the first round of the Lions 2 years in a row. It's frustrating. And then you think, like, what do we have to change? What needs to change? What other free agents do we bring? And then you have all these conversations about Stafford and Cup. But the one thing I will mention, if, the Eagles, for whatever reason, do get knocked out by the Packers, So I think you are rooting for the Commanders to win the game because you're going to get Eagles, Packers. Say the Eagles get knocked out by the Packers, and then the Vikings or the Lions the following week in the divisional round do get knocked out as the higher seed, as the number 1 seed. Then guess who hosts the NFC Championship?
Oh, yeah, exactly. That's what happened when it was a home game against the Cardinals. Then we went away to Tampa, won that one. And then we played the Niners because they were the wild card in SoFi. That was awesome. And then Super Bowl in SoFi.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure they won that one. Sorry, Niners.
Yeah.
Maybe next year. 30 years, 30-year anniversary for the Niners coming up in February. Let's get to 49 years. That would be great. So here's what we're dealing with Jimmy G. I just want to read this quote from McVay. McVay said, "What I've seen is a guy that approached it like a pro." McVay said on Garoppolo's approach this season. Been a great teammate. You could just see the respect, the reverence for Matthew, and really just for each other that they have for one another. Garoppolo also said on Wednesday that the opportunity has been a long time coming. He hasn't played since week 8 of last year when he was the quarterback of the Raiders. So having signed with the Rams to be Stafford's backup, it will be Jimmy Garoppolo's first start of the season and first since week 8 of last season with the Raiders. So Jimmy G it's going to be a fun watch. I mean, you brought him in, you gave him a 1-year deal. He was suspended for the first 2 weeks of the season. You were praying that Matthew Stafford didn't get hurt early on, so you didn't have to see Stetson Bennett. So now you're going to get Jimmy G. It's similar to the Carson Wentz situation last year, except McVay is not going to call 19 quarterback draws for Jimmy G because he's not that kind of player. But yeah, I think between getting to see Jimmy G in the final week of the season and some of these comments on Rob Havenstein. So I think the big concern with Rob Havenstein is the shoulder injury that he suffered in practice. McVay said was a freak injury, but this is via Stu Jackson on Twitter. He said that Rob Havenstein won't play versus the Seahawks, but is tilting towards being available for the wild card playoff game per Sean McVay. And McVay also said on the Coach McVay show that he expects Rob Havenstein to be ready to go for the playoffs. So you have any vacancies up front. That's the scary part, but that's the only injury concern that I have on this team. You're potentially going to get John Johnson back to the playoffs as well. Everybody else is fully healthy. So this week of rest is all that much more important just to make sure these guys get their bodies right and prepare for a home playoff game.
Yeah. Yeah. The week of, for Havenstein, absolutely. Like, they should not be playing. We need him in the playoffs 100%. I think that's the most crucial player besides, anybody that's Big Cup, Stafford, Puka. I think Havenstein is the next man up in that rotation. I'm just trying to think of a world where they do play everybody. Just win with Jimmy G, like play the game like you need the win is how I want them to play. And I know Seattle's going to be playing tough because they're pissed, but yeah, like you said, like last year with Wentz, like they did what they could to win that game, and it helped them out, like seeding wise, I think, or maybe it didn't matter at that point. But they played to win, and they played a really good game, and they won the game. So, maybe Jimmy G under McVay looks a little better than he did as a Las Vegas Raider, and he can go out there and win us the game. I think that's totally possible. So hopefully that's the case. I just wish there was a bit of a world where, because I know, like, the thought is, if we play our starters, it looks like we are playing to play the Commanders. We don't want to play that 5 seed, and it makes us look vulnerable. Blah blah blah. I don't know. I just wish there was a dialogue or like a way that you can steer it so you're more like, hey, we want to win this game because we don't like Seattle. You know what I mean? Like kind of how Dan Campbell did for the 49ers game. Is like, this one's about pride. And it's like, you really didn't need to win that game at all.
They said all that, but also they were fighting for the 1 seed. Like, you're still fighting for the 1 seed.
I don't think it mattered if they won that game, because then even though their record would have been worse against the, like, going into that,
they would have had the tiebreaker against the Vikings if they beat them. Okay, I get it. Yeah. No, but I think you're right, because a win versus Seattle means 6 straight, right? Like, you're rolling into the playoffs.
5-1 in the division.
Yeah, and you'd be 5-1 in the division, exactly. And you're getting these young guys, Jordan Whittington, Blake Corum, you're getting them all up to speed. You get a guy like Justin Dedich up front who played some good football earlier on this season. Maybe even get Joe Noteboom to play some better football against some backups. So who the hell knows? Probably not, but still. Yeah, you get Warren McClendon out there. Your tackles need to develop. Your defense, some of the younger guys, it's a good opportunity for them to keep rolling and get things rolling in the right direction for the playoffs to start. So, yeah, I think we're pretty much ready to go for this weekend. Keep your eyes on Commanders, Packers, and Vikings and Lions just to see where we all net out. And we'll keep you updated, obviously, as we go across all social platforms. But Nick, do you have a pick this week that you wanted to share with us? You want to go Vikings, Lions?
Yeah, no, I got two. As we were talking about the game. I mean, we're ending the season on 5 wins in a row, so hopefully we can make it 6 in a row. So great end to Nick's picks, another positive year. I like let's finally get Blake Corum in the end zone. So
Okay.
I'm gonna do Blake Corum anytime touchdown, and then I will do you know what? That's it. I don't want to put my 2 cents in for the Vikings Lions game. I just want to sit back and watch it as a fan of the sport and hope that the Vikings win, but I just don't see a world where the Lions don't get the 1 seed, to be honest.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah, I don't know. It's going to be a really fun one. How is that not a primetime game? Is it a primetime?
It's got to be, right?
I would think so.
Yeah, I think they moved it to Sunday Night Football.
Good. Yeah, that'll be fun. So we'll keep you guys updated with everything that unfolds. In the meantime, make sure that you guys are liked and subscribed. We appreciate you guys. It's been a hell of a fun year. Everybody that's been commenting, that has been liking these videos, that has been along for the ride across all of our social media platforms. We greatly appreciate you guys. Keep it up. We're going to keep things rolling in the right direction, just like this Rams team heading into wildcard weekend.
Yeah, go Rams, guys. Thanks for listening. We really appreciate it. Blake Corum, find the end zone finally this year, because I can't believe it hasn't happened yet.
I love it. I think it's a great bet. I think you're going to cash on that. And you'll probably get it at like plus 800 maybe.
No, it'll
Not
be
that
like
high?
maybe plus 200 max.
We'll see. All right,
Yeah.
cool. Make some money regardless. We love you guys. Go Rams.